All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of GIS Peer Success webinar. We are on episode number 16, Fostering an IT GIS Partnership. I am your host, Toby Soto of GISsuccess.com, your resource to career-changing content focused on GIS leadership and management. Quick shout out to Tim Hayes, GIS manager for the city of San Jose, California. He did our very first guest blog post on GISsuccess.com, and it was on the top 3 soft skills for GIS career growth, and really great information in there. He's got many, many years of experience, and so he kind of posted it on LinkedIn there, and it's taken off quite a bit. So if you haven't checked it out, do so. It's really great content. So let me ask you, how much time are you really spending on leveling yourself up? Are you doing like 1 hour a week, 1 hour a month, maybe a meetup every quarter or a conference once a year? But is it really providing you enough training for you to be able to level up yourself and give you the confidence to make the right decisions and progress in your GIS? If not, go check out GISsuccessnetwork.com. That is our new membership site for tactical training in the GIS leadership and management space. And sign up soon, because I'm going to have a live masterclass on October 17th. It's going to be on GIS leadership level 1. As you know, and maybe you have seen some of my content, that there are 5 GIS leadership levels, and we're going to do a deep dive in level 1. So get in there, sign up. I don't want you to miss that. Today it's not tres amigos, it's dos amigos. I notice Wade isn't here today, but we do have my co-host Tim Nolan from Collin County, Texas. And I want to give out a very big thank you to him for being a part of our show and part of our process here. And Wade's on vacation, and much deserved vacation, so we don't blame him for not being here.
He's here in spirit with us. I know he is.
Yeah.
He's probably checking in. I'll see if he's on the list.
Oh, that'd be funny if he texts in. We have a large community. We got 138 registered, which is, I think, our second biggest registration on the webinar. And a huge thank you for showing up, taking time out of your day to be with us. You guys keep showing up, we'll keep producing episodes. So, thank you again. For those of you watching on the replay on YouTube, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell to get reminders of newly posted webinar videos. And for the live audience, if you want to input into chat, make sure you set the chat setting to all panelists and attendees. And also, if you have any questions, go ahead and put it in the QA box, and Tim will be reviewing some of those, and hopefully we can interject some of those questions into our discussion today. So before I introduce our special guest and dive into our topic, we've been doing kind of an experiment for the past couple episodes, and it's an audience experiment to kind of engage you guys into our discussions. And basically what that is, if you're not aware, is we ask you, the audience, putting in chat, what are you guys working on now? What tasks are you working on? And if you're comfortable in sharing that, please share your email address, because what ends up happening is it creates a level of engagement amongst yourself, and you get some great valuable content out of this. And Tim, what do we do with that information?
What?
We put it in Slack. He's our Slack guy. I threw him off. We
didn't cover this in pre.
No, yeah, I gotta keep you on your toes. That's why we're live.
Yeah, that's what we'll do. We'll do that. All in Slack for sure.
So in Slack, it's like in chat. Go ahead and put in what you guys are doing, what you're working on. Put your email address, and then hopefully there's some engagement that can happen amongst you guys. So Tim, I'm going to ask you, what are you doing now while people are inputting that?
So I'll try to make this snappy. We've got a lot of stuff to cover with Jonathan, but so I'm in IT. a GIS guy inside of IT, so I'm really excited about this particular topic. And one of the things that we're doing on our app dev side or application side is we're doing a thing called mob programming. I won't get too much into that. Maybe y'all can Google what that is. But what I'm excited about is my GIS team has also decided to look into mob programming, not so much for writing code, but rather using that technique as a learning mechanism for, like, maybe taking the MOOC classes or learning to do a model together. Kind of the idea is that more heads on the problem are a lot better. So we're going through a mob programming exercise, and next month I'll tell you how it's going. We're a sprint in, and everything seems to be going a-okay. The team seems to like it. Hopefully GIS will be doing that by the next time we check in. So that's kind of how we're handling things right now.
Sweet. I'd like to see what comes of that.
Yeah.
Maybe do a little,
Very excited about it.
Little subtopic on something like that. For myself, with Soto Media, being that my GIS support and services company, developing a needs assessment for one of my clients, working with InterGov. InterGov is a GIS-centric based ERP system. And so creating a needs assessment for one of my clients and to find out what GIS layers and map services are needed to help support their city. So that's one of the things that I'm working on. The other one I've already told you about with GISsuccess.com is the Masterclass, the GIS Leadership Level 1 webinar. So that's another thing that I've been working on. So anyways, so that's our what we're doing now segment. So let's transfer to our main topic and our main guest here today. We have a very special guest. I'm a fanboy. Now let's just put it to you. Let's just make it clear here. Jonathan Reichental. Reichental?
Yes.
Reichental.
Okay. Oof, man, I was worried about that one. CEO of Human Future and former CIO for the City of Palo Alto. He is a award-winning technology leader with over 30 years career, spanning both private and public sector. In 2016, he was named one of the top 20 most influential CIOs in the United States, and was also recognized by the White House for his innovation in the local government sector. He also has online courses in LinkedIn. I don't know if you guys have seen that through lynda.com. It's all about quantum computing, blockchain technologies, the fourth industrial revolution. The man knows his stuff. He's very well involved in this. But let me tell you what his bio doesn't tell you. All right?
Yeah.
I've been following Jonathan for a long time. Back in his days at the City of Palo Alto. And his innovation in government, he was a model. He was definitely a model city for open data and innovation. And some of the things that he's done has just resonated amongst a lot of other cities. And he's really a trailblazer in that area. And so that's how I was like instantly connected with him to find out, what is he doing? What is the city doing? How can we apply some of the things that he's done? There's some major hurdles that you had to go over to make those things happen, because you just can't just flip a switch and now you're innovative. It just doesn't happen that way. But he's also a keynote speaker on worldwide stages. He's been to Dubai, he's been to Dublin, he's been all over the world doing his keynotes. And if you ever get a chance to check him out on those keynotes on YouTube, get in there, take a look. Great content out of there. And last but not least, you're an advocate for climate change, and that starts with the cities. So, that's all the stuff that your bio doesn't tell you. That those are the things that I find interesting, that I think people really should know about. So, thank you for joining us and being on the show, Jonathan.
Well, thank you, Toby. I'm looking forward to meeting that guy you just introduced.
He's right here. Yeah.
I'm just kidding. No, but thank you so much. What a lovely, warm welcome you're giving me. I wanted to thank you and Tim for doing this. I became aware of it just not so long ago, and it's terrific that you are using your expertise, both of you, to share with the world and bring on people to broaden knowledge around GIS. And what we're going to talk about today, I think, is how misunderstood it is. But both of you are helping a lot, and so well done. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's one of those things where you scratch your own itch. I had issues in finding great leadership content and information on the web, and it was all over the place, or there were some specific trainings out there that were highly expensive and not easy to get to, and I'm saying there's got to be a better way. I mean, there's how many cities, how many GIS managers, how many people using GIS? Let's curate this information and create a centralized place for someone to go and learn this, on their time. So tell us, when you're at the City of Palo Alto, I'm sure that there were lots of challenges that you had to address in innovation. And so what were some of those challenges that you faced, with GIS and bringing them up into working on that mission of being innovative?
Yeah, it's a nice and broad question. I am a private sector guy, and so when I did accept the invitation to join the City of Palo Alto as their first CIO reporting to the city manager, part of my calculus was to answer this problem statement. How could technology come to bear on delivering better government services, delivering a city better? Being the birthplace of Silicon Valley, I thought there's no better place than to try this out and to experiment with this thesis than Palo Alto. So it was new to me, by the way. I had an illustrious private sector career prior to that, and now and then for 7 years, I immersed myself deeply in local government. I was really very impressed with the people I met when I first joined. I was particularly struck by the passion, and that most of the people I met were coming from a really good place. Whether they could achieve their objectives, that's a question of tools and training and things, but they were coming, from a place of real desire to make a difference. And so I was attracted to that. I really liked that kind of environment. I also thought it was an opportunity to take the tools and the team we had and see what we could do, what would be possible if we were creative, if we thought differently, from day to day. You make some friends, and when you do that, you have some people who don't agree with you. So let me anticipate at least one question, or statement that someone could think or make, which is, well, it was Palo Alto, it was Silicon Valley, it was easy what you did. Mm-hmm. And I always, right, I tell people, no, not a single day was easy. We earned, every small bit of progress we made over those 7 years, and I hope to share some of the ways we did that. One of the characteristics of GIS in Palo Alto was that we were not part of the Esri family, and I didn't know what GIS was before I came to the city. I mean, I knew it was a geographic information system, but I didn't know the extent to which it was embedded in city workflows and delivering services. And then when I'd meet other CIOs in other cities, they would say, but why aren't you guys on the same system as us? For some reason, many years before I joined the city, a decision was made to acquire a different solution. So that was, that didn't make things easier. Mm-hmm. And I say that politely. Certainly we had to work with what we had. I kind of jumping around a little bit, but this is relevant. I inherited a team, because when you're a leader, and you come in, you have to work with the team you're given. They were desperate for leadership, actually, and they were desperate for structure, and They had amazing ideas, and they wanted, you know, somebody to work with to channel those ideas and make things happen. And you know, we really delivered on that. Some people thrived, and frankly, some people left because they didn't like the degree of change that we were introducing. And the GIS team also hadn't got the attention it deserved. I mean, that is an understatement if there ever was one.
Yeah.
So they weren't getting attention. But going back to the thought of, well, what made it unique? Palo Alto is a full utility city. It's the only full utility city west of the Mississippi, I'm told. So we're talking electricity, gas, water, wastewater, and fiber internet. And all those things are deeply, you know, integrated with GIS capabilities. So right from the start, when I joined, it was obvious to me that GIS was an incredibly important part of our utilities organization. But it didn't stop there, of course. It was being used in public works and in planning and in public safety. So it needed some care and attention, you know, as did the whole IT team. And, you know, we embarked on this first of all, our first 3-year IT strategy, and then we actually expanded that to 5 years. And then in the last couple of years that I was there, we launched yet another 3-year IT strategy. So those are that's the environment to which I entered, and the challenges were, to summarize, you know, a passionate team without leadership, passionate team with not the right tools, but all the right ingredients were there for me and my team to make a success out of it.
Yeah. So you mentioned right there that you weren't aware of GIS. You weren't aware of, you know, the capabilities and things like that. And a lot of our community here, they're GIS champions within their divisions or in their departments, and they're just aching to get the awareness of the CIO of what GIS is doing for their department and what it can do for the city or for the county or for, you know, their utility. You know, what were some of the things that help gain your awareness? Maybe that you can give them some support, you know, to get on your radar, you know, so that you can realize, hey, this is really a very vital business system that can make a lot of inroads.
Yeah. So I was, you know, kind of as a sort of entry point to this question, I was aware of GIS. I just wasn't aware the degree to which it was being used and the degree to which it was absolutely essential to the function of Palo Alto, and frankly, to the function of every, you know, government administration in local, state, and federal contexts. Well, part of the answer is, it's not a great, you know, answer because I know where you're headed with the question, but I'll try to get there, is I reached out and I wanted to know, you know, so that's more of a proactive, right? So I, as a leader, needed to understand our talent, you know, our capabilities and our tools. I needed to understand the state of projects, how systems were integrated. So there was a large degree of me as a new city leader coming in and saying, I got to know what I'm working with here. You know?
Yeah.
If I know what we're working with, we can do something. But that doesn't always happen. And I think in your question, embedded in your question is this thought that perhaps you have leaders that aren't proactive, or they are distracted. They're focused on something else, right? So I think there has to be a bit of a push too. I do think it's time for the GIS team to remind itself that it's not secondary or, you know, some back office administrative tool. I think the GIS leaders and the whole GIS team needs to refresh themselves and realize that they are central to the success of any agency. And once you get into that mindset, it's time to say, hey, we want to talk about it. We want to share it. We not only want to get you engaged in what we're doing, but we want to explore the art of the possible. and make you successful, and make the city successful. So I do think there's a push component that GIS teams shouldn't be shy about.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're kind of modest in government. We're always a little bit more humble, a bit modest. Sometimes that's not so good. You know, you got to say it's time for us to shine. It's time for us to show off what we do and the amazing work we do. So I do want to encourage, no matter what's happened in the past, regardless of what has happened in the past, consider next week a new day, Monday. Start this mission. And figure out how can you extend an invitation to different parts of the organization, including IT, to talk about the richness of what GIS is. There's two other things I want to quickly share. One is GIS in Palo Alto was under IT. Okay. And so that was a dynamic that was positive. I understand in many, many agencies, it's not that way.
Right.
And what's interesting is we explored that. We actually, in fact, at one point we did get an external company to come in and evaluate the GIS landscape in Palo Alto. And that included looking at new tool sets, what would be the next, what would be the new generation of GIS capabilities that we would build or acquire. And their recommendation, and there was a group of us, of participants, we evaluated, was to keep GIS under IT. It was what was right for Palo Alto. It might not be right for your agency, so I'm not saying that's a best practice. I'm just saying figure out what the right mix is for your agency. But the other thing I want to say, and I think this, hopefully this is a real value add. You could argue that GIS has a problem in that people have a preconceived notion of what it is. For a lot of people, it's just a map, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's a very poor way of viewing the GIS universe. But I was thinking about this in planning, in preparing for our conversation today. I was thinking about this, and I thought, isn't GIS really part of data science? Aren't GIS people data scientists? Yep. Are we talking about the topic correctly? Mm-hmm. And so I would invite a conversation about that. This is a hot topic. Organizations are acquiring chief data officers. They're hiring data analysts. The private sector realized the value of data a long time ago. They realized that's how you acquire new customers. That's how you position your product. That's how you go after marketplaces. The government's been slow in using data generally to drive decision making, to really reveal, underlying issues, and to be an engine for progress. That's changing, though. I'm the first to say I'm an optimist on this topic. Government is beginning to see data as a real asset.
Sure.
But I don't think they think of data as an asset and include GIS in that full process. So what I'm saying is perhaps we need to talk about it and think about it more broadly. And when that conversation does start to happen between the GIS manager and the team and the CIO and his or her team, perhaps with the city manager, we got to start talking about GIS as a data science, as part of the data revolution that we're undergoing. It's going to be part of data governance. And I think if you can start to bring it into that conversation, it suddenly broadens it as an asset to the organization.
Yeah, totally. By looking at it in a data-centric way like that, and taking the geo out of it,
I think
there's a lot of data there, that could be mined, and
for the GIS community that's out there, right? They need to own this, right? I think, and there's a quite, like this kind of leads us to the next question about how do you assert GIS into projects that are generally run by IT. I think if we, as GIS folks, just go, we are data scientists, we do know how to do this, we do know how to visualize this information, instead of, because if we don't do it, if the GIS community doesn't do it, particularly in government, they're going to just hire someone else to do it for us. And we're probably going to be, the GIS people are going to have to be the ones that support that effort, knowing that we could have well done it ourselves. So I think this is our opportunity. And tell me, Jonathan, do you really see this as the next big thing for us in GIS?
It feels to me like it's a big part of it. You think about accountants in the finance department don't talk about financial data. They just talk about data. Librarians don't necessarily talk about library data. They just talk about data. In GIS, we also need to talk about data, but it's a very particular type of data. And I think that could be a useful way of beginning to think differently in your agency about this topic. So you raised the question of how do you integrate GIS into IT projects, or maybe just projects earlier, rather than learning about it a couple of weeks before it goes live, or you're halfway through and it's like, we need 2 GIS people for the next month, and they're like, wait a minute, they got other priorities. A little bit of planning there would have been nice. Look, this is a huge topic, and a problem every organization has. And I'm not talking about including GIS. I'm talking about including the right people at the right time. That's really what this question is about. Whether you're in the private sector or the public sector or academia, this is a central issue. I've tackled this issue. I've been 30 years in this career in IT, and both on the private side and now on the public, and then on the public side now, back to the private side again. And I had to sort of figure out how to succeed here. And being a CIO at a couple of different organizations, I saw it firsthand, and it was always one of the biggest problems. Because you know what? It's not just about not having the right skill or input at the right time. It's about people feeling left out. It's about the absence of inclusion. And because of that, people then aren't your biggest fans, or they're not advocates. You're playing catch up afterwards, because when the project goes live and those people who thought they should have been involved in the decision making, they're like, well, now you want to talk to us, or we don't agree with what you did, so we're not going to use the product. We're not going to use the tool. There's all sorts of horrible manifestations of this phenomenon. So when I think about including the right people at the right time, it could be GIS staff, but it could be legal. It could be the procurement department. It could be members of the IT team who are sitting right next to you. The trick here is really about establishing some level of IT governance. Now, those that know me, and I probably have a few friends on the webinar today or watching on YouTube, they're like, here he goes again. He's talking about IT governance again. The reason I talk about it a lot and I write about it a lot, it's one of the secrets to success in organizations. Mm-hmm. If you can put in place some level of IT governance, and the reason I choose those words specifically, because a rigorous, deep, detailed IT governance process is not for every organization. Because in fact, what it'll do, it'll hold organization back if you don't manage it right. Right. So you got to figure out the level. If the organization is small and pretty agile, you want to have fairly light IT governance. Right. And then, if it's a bank, insurance company, or it's a very big agency, it's got to have some more rigor to it. And so IT governance is about, it is identifying what projects to work on. It's about identifying funding. It's then prioritization. It's then resource management. So it does, no matter what level of IT governance you adopt, you're trying to fundamentally match your capability with the objective, right? Can this organization achieve this objective, and how do we go about it? So there's a minimum. You've got to have, priority, funding, scheduling, resources. These are kind of some of the core things. I would say, now that we've passed the first question, which is how do you get the CIO and the GIS manager together? We'll just, grab a coffee, have a beer together, go to lunch often, or just bring teams together in the right way. Once those conversations start, now we need to start to talk about IT governance. How can we get GIS embedded in that workflow much earlier on? Mm-hmm. And here's the thing I say, I will invite lots of people to the beginning of a project. I'll invite the communications team, the procurement team, people from various departments. And we'll quickly find out if they're necessary, Because once we begin to craft the scope of the effort, let's take the GIS manager or the GIS analyst. That person, she says, you know what, there's no geospatial component to this project. We don't need to be involved.
Mm-hmm.
And so they don't waste any more time. They understand the project, the objectives, you know, maybe look for some integration opportunities, whatever it is, but they fundamentally decide that they don't need to be around. Equally, they're like, oh man, this is going to touch the GIS system, you know, hundreds of times a day, or there's all these interfaces, all these touch points.
Right.
The other part that I just will say, and then I'll wrap up, is GIS is an opportunity for innovation. It brings so much to the table that when the project is being designed, if people come in with certain ideas already, they already kind of have a bias in how they want to approach the project or how it might feel and look. What GIS can do is say, have you thought about the geo data components of this project? Or how about this app? What happens if we enhance it with a map? You know, and you know, or you were trying to solve that problem in a very complicated way. GIS can solve it in a much simpler way because we have the data and the interface and the API. You know, we have the magic to make it happen. So you've got the timing, get GIS into the governance process, and also think of it in terms of it being an innovation catalyst.
Yep. Those are really excellent points there, Jonathan. And, you know, kind of going back to the fact of, you know, in order to institute that governance, you have to have that relationship with IT. You have to have that relationship with the CIO. And I think that's kind of a cross to bear that some of, you know, the GIS folks are having trouble trying to establish with IT, because it's always been GIS and it's always been IT. And there's this clash of, hey, you're getting into my area of expertise. You know, I have a GIS DBA. I don't need your DBA. You know, I need my
Mm-hmm.
GIS developer. I don't need, you know, the IT developer, you know. And so I think, you know, we need to create that fostering of that relationship that we're all inclusive. But again, that doesn't work for everybody because not everybody is under IT. You may have GIS and public utilities, you know, and not under IT, but there's still a lot of heavy lifting that has to happen with IT in order to make GIS flourish, you know. So that's where it's like, okay, we need to foster these relationships. Mm-hmm. So that there's trust, because sometimes there's not a lot of trust there too. It's like, you know, why are you getting into my area? Why are you doing this? You know, now we got cybersecurity. Oh, these IT guys are just really putting a hammer on us. We can't do anything because they want to, like, you know, put, you know, named users on everything that we do, and it's just like blocking everything, you know. So I know that's probably something that Tim probably deals with more than I do, you know. But you know, that's where, you know, that relationship and that fostering has to happen to develop that trust.
Well, let me try to just throw out an additional thought on that important point you're making. So regardless of whether GIS reports into IT or not into IT, you know, you talk about that sort of tension between the GIS team and IT. It's possible that IT has tension with others. It's also possible that GIS has tension with others. So whilst we're focusing on these two entities, which have a very close technical relationship, mm-hmm. there may be other areas that also need to be integrated better. And, you know, Palo Alto, we had our fair share of that. Not so much in IT to GIS because it reported to me, so, and I was passionate about the topic, but more so GIS and maybe with some of our other departments. And so we needed to really think about that. How do we get everybody on the same page? How do we build that trust that you're talking about? And we did establish a GIS steering group at the city. And, you know, somebody might be watching this and sighing and saying, oh, another committee, another group. I agree. There's too many. But you got to have ones that are highly valuable and strategic. And given the interconnected nature of GIS, the way it is integrated in so many aspects of the function of a city, I think this is one area where establishing that steering group would be valuable. So what we did was we picked all the departments that had a GIS relationship, and then we found the champions in each, and then we brought them into a room once every month at least. And we talked about, and this included IT, by the way, we talked about our joint mission, that it wasn't about what's important for GIS or what is important for public safety. It's like, what's important for the city, and more, and above that, what's important to the community. But now we're all talking about things that are important to, the people we deliver to, including each other, but through the lens of GIS. By the way, IT did not chair the meeting, and GIS did not chair the meeting. We got one of the other departments to chair it, and we found the person who was really passionate. So if you don't have this joint department steering committee for GIS, think about it, explore it, test it, play with the idea.
Yeah, no, I'm a big advocate for GIS steering committees. How else are you going to know where to go? How else do you know how to plan and prioritize? I mean, and I should preface that really comes into play when you get into like your medium to large size cities and counties, because there's just so many moving parts. If you're in a city that's under 30,000, 50,000 people, it may be overkill. I mean, you can probably just walk around the building and ask. It's, you don't have to have a gigantic committee to do so. So, yeah, that definitely right there, helps share the burden of decision, share the burden of cost. Because as GIS is not cheap. There's a lot of infrastructure, there's a lot of data moving, and there's a lot of applications that are built on top of it. So, you can institute change management, because as new systems come on, you got to make sure that the data moves, the integration points move, all those things are updated, and you need that type of centralized committee to do that. And it takes money, takes cost, and someone's got to burden that cost. And it shouldn't always just fall on IT, shouldn't always just fall on GIS, because there's a shared resource there.
I mean, just to put it in context, you say GIS is expensive, and it is, but in the context of IT, it's not. Everything in IT is expensive. And part of the IT concern is how do we make ourselves not be just a cost center? We are the backbone, right? Everything that the county has to run, but yet when you look at bottom line items, like a data center, that's you need to forklift upgrade your data center. That's expensive. So you have to sell it better than just, hey, we need this because we're IT. You have to really get underneath kind of what Jonathan was talking about. And this is why this stuff has to happen. And it just happens to be that technology can help with to achieve that. And hopefully with governance, and I think we had a question from Annie about what about the notion of a GIS governance? Is that being too specific, or what do you think about that, Jonathan?
Well, I like it. I'm a big governance advocate, as you can tell. I just believe in things that work really well. Like, I have to tell my quick governance story. When I was the CIO up at O'Reilly Media, working with O'Reilly, it was a similar situation to starting with the city, in that great people, an amazing company, but they didn't necessarily have the tech leadership that was necessary, or the tools, or the support. So I got in there and kind of got into the weeds pretty quickly, and started IT governance, of course, and reorged, and created a whole series of best practices to help us deliver more, faster, and more innovatively. And so one day, about 6 months in, the operations manager comes into my office. He's all giddy and excited. And he says, Jonathan, I'm looking at the data here. I can't understand. We're delivering all these projects on time, and we've got all this volume now of projects we never were able to deliver before. I don't understand what's happening. It's like, it's great, isn't it?
What's wrong?
Yeah. Yeah. Let me say, it wasn't all rosy, but that was one of the positive stories.
Something must be going wrong. It's working.
Exactly. I like that. And I said, and I smiled. And first of all, to me, this was a happy moment because he was happy. You know, to me, that's the kind of the dividend in many ways. Like, now you're happy. Now your team is getting excited about what we're doing. And I let the sort of moment just be what it was for a while. And then I said, you know what? It's not an accident. Like, this is not happening just like randomly. It's just because we're on board now with some very rigorous processes around IT governance, around project management, around metrics. I said, we're doing these things and you're seeing the results. So, you know, it was a great sort of vindication of when you do these things, you actually do have better outcomes. They're not, if you're doing these things, if you're doing all this administration and you're not getting better outcomes, okay, that's a problem, right? I totally get that. So I'm not some sort of, you know, I don't know, my head in the sand. I realize there are other issues that come into play, but at least get those basics right. You know, reiterate often if there's too much bureaucracy or there's too many bottlenecks. So the question was about GIS governance. Now, I do think it may be a question of scale. You know, is there enough? Is the city big enough, or excuse me, the agency big enough? And are there enough projects? Because you got to evaluate that. You certainly don't want to have a rigorous, onerous process for, you know, one new GIS need every 3 months. You know, so think about that. If there is a lot of GIS activity, and GIS is absolutely integrated in many aspects of the organization, you got to think about whether this gets rolled into IT governance, into the GIS steering committee, or you want to spin off a specific GIS governance group. I just had a thought, actually. One of the chat session items just reminded me. Of course, there are GIS projects and there are GIS implications, but we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that GIS data needs care and feeding, right? And I know you guys don't. I just forgot to bring it up. So there could be the argument for GIS governance for the data, and you could meet frequently because there's always questions of data, particularly when there's, you know, issues, there's something wrong with the data. There's often new requests for reports, and so I do think we could consider that instead of a 2-hour GIS governance meeting, there might be a 30-minute GIS data governance meeting. So you got to figure out what is the right mechanism relative to your need and the scale of your organization.
Well, you probably can just kind of wrap that up into just data governance, and the fact, because, you know, with all the open data initiatives, you know, data is data, whether it's GIS or whether it's financial data or whether it's, you know, customer service data, you know.
I like that.
You know, it can all just be wrapped up into that package, or I should say into that single governance experience, you know, and it shouldn't matter really where, you know, those data pieces are coming from. It should just all go through that data governance funnel.
Yeah, I think that's a very well made point. You know, if the organization is mature enough to have adopted or is ready to roll out that data governance strategy, I think that's a great place to put it. And it also reminds us, again, that GIS is a data science, and it should live there. The only maybe caution is, you know, if the data governance meeting is an hour and you spend 40 minutes on GIS stuff,
That's true.
the other folks aren't going to be terribly happy. So you got to figure that out.
Yeah, there's a balance there for sure. So going back to Palo Alto and the innovations that you guys are doing there, again, it was just like groundbreaking, you know, to see a city be extremely progressive in a short amount of time. There had to have been a lot of, you know, red tape you had to go through. Did you have to like reestablish policies? Did you have to, you know, create open data policies? Did you Have to put committees together to help prioritize your innovation efforts, and how did GIS fit into that?
Yeah, you know, again, people who know me will probably laugh when I say this, but leadership is very important. You know, my saying is it all begins with leadership. And again, it may be a cliche, but there's an enormous amount of value to having leaders who believe in things. A leader who is your advocate, you know, supervisor who is invested in you. We all want that environment. We all want a boss who's your biggest supporter and is open to your ideas. Doesn't always happen though. I acknowledge it doesn't always happen. But we do need leadership for the kinds of things you just described. In Palo Alto, it was a bit of the perfect storm, right? So I was hired by a relatively new city manager, Jim Keane, who by himself was a innovative leader, and you know had ran the Alliance for Innovation for a while, and had a reputation for wanting to do things in a creative way within the the boundaries of what's permissible. And you know, when he came to Palo Alto, he was surprised that the heart of Silicon Valley didn't have a more progressive technology strategy. And so he said, you know what, when the prior IT director retired, he really went out to look for someone a little different, and they got me, which was definitely someone a little different. You know, when I finally sort of agreed to take the position, and I didn't do it, you know, on day one. It took some deep discussions. I was debriefing with the city manager, and I said, you know, I'm taking a risk on this, and I'm doing this. And he said, well, we're taking a risk on you, you know, and I think that's exactly right. On the one hand, I could have joined the city and said, this is craziness, you know, and left after a month. The city could have said, this guy Jonathan, he's like, he's out of control, you know. he doesn't understand how, you know, public sector works. Fortunately, we found a lovely workable medium. So having a city manager who had a very strong predisposition towards innovation and creativity, and myself deliberately hired to help execute on that vision, I think that was a big part of it. So one can't ignore, you know, having the right leaders in place.
Yeah.
Now, not every organization is going to have two people like that. So what do you do? I mean, even though Jim and I were big advocates, we had a decent amount of people, and I'll only talk personally, a lot of people who didn't believe in what I believed in, right? And so innovation was hard, and the breakthroughs we had were really a reflection on stubborn perseverance and patience. You know, when people ask me to describe, you know, what are my qualities, I suppose, I say patience and perseverance. If you have enough of those and a few other attributes, you can get through a lot and get stuff done. So I do think that there was no like a shortcut. But I think what there was a real attempt by myself and my colleagues and my team to explain the mission, to explain what we're doing and why we're doing it, why we're trying new things, why we're okay with a little bit more risk than is typically tolerable in a public agency environment. But here's the other real revelation. It's about delivery. You know, a lot of us can talk, a lot of us can write strategies, a lot of us can, you know, do presentations. What matters is what you deliver. And so I've got sort of these. I wrote this very popular piece about the 5 things a CIA should do in the first 100 days. You know, and the first one was don't break anything. But one of the others was deliver on a few things that were important to people, and you establish credibility by doing that. You know, people will give you a honeymoon period. People will say we'll give him or her period of time, but goodness, if you don't deliver, you know, you're going to be you're not going to be the superstar that you want to be and that people would like you to be. You're going to be put on the side, like you're just another just another civil servant who's, going to deliver the way he delivers or she delivers. So I do think that good delivery enables you to do bolder things, because now you have credibility, you have more trust, and people are prepared to invest a little bit more and also say, well, he did it last time, maybe he can do it again. I'll tell you what my breakthrough delivery project was, and I think what opened up the way for the rest of my team's time with the time I was there. When I joined the city, there was a very old telephone system, very old. Some of the phones were missing the numbers. In one instance, a director told me he was missing an 8, and so whenever he had to call a number that had an 8 in it, he would ask his assistant to call the number and transfer it over to him.
Wow.
You can't make that stuff up. There's probably people on this webinar or watching that are like, I have a story just like that.
Yeah.
So the project was underway. The money had been assigned. It was going to be a big project to replace all the, the cabling, replace it with Cat 5e cabling, put a VoIP telephone system in place, but it just wasn't moving fast enough. And I think it was like the summer, and I was giving an update to the executive team, and I said, we're going to deliver new telephones on everybody's desk by the holidays, by the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked around, and body language can tell you a lot. I think most people in that room were like, whatever. We've been promised that before, it's not going to happen.
Right.
And the thing I didn't tell in that statement was, I did say I would deliver telephones to everybody's desk. I didn't say they'd be plugged in. So I did allow myself to have this big out.
Yeah.
It didn't work. We were going to put telephones on your desk. Anyway, kidding aside, we delivered it. And by the holidays, everybody, all 1,000 staff at the City of Palo Alto had a brand new VoIP telephone, and it was working perfectly. People were so pleased by the performance of my team and the ability for us to do what we said on time, that it did get easier. I felt the next time I asked for money, or I said another project was to be delivered, there was much greater belief that it was going to happen. And again, I would just expand that. Your question was then specific, how to GIS. Again, it was about delivery. GIS was struggling a little bit to meet expectations. And so, I had to work with them to make sure they had the tools and they had the support they needed. Mm-hmm. We had to prioritize because they had a very long list. So I said, let's work with our sponsors to figure out what's most important. And then we began to deliver. Now, the storyline on GIS in Palo Alto was a much longer arc. I mean, we didn't have immediate success, and it took actually quite a long time. But we got there. We got there eventually, and finally, the city migrated over to Esri as well. And so it was about making sure the right things were in place and the right leadership was there. Mm-hmm. But I want to come back to the innovation part of your question. I asked our GIS manager at the time, what can we do to magnify the innovative aspects of GIS so people understand it's more than just a map. It's more than just the width of the streets. Mm-hmm. And so at the time, and I thank you for mentioning this in the intro, we were very much embracing the open government and open data movement. And I said, could we open GIS? Could we create an API to a whole set of GIS data sets so anyone in the world can use the Palo Alto, GIS data? And he said, well, I'll go back to the team. We'll talk about it. Within a few months, we deployed what we called OpenGIS. I think we were one of the first to do it. And what was neat about the design is it was largely free. We built it using, at the time, Google Fusion tables and Google Maps. And we mashed it together. Plus, we imported some of our data that was, unregulated open data from the city. And suddenly we had this open GIS system. It's available today. People can use it. And that got a lot of people's attention.
Mm-hmm.
Got a lot of leadership, got council attention, got public attention. It was written about in some tech magazines, and it was online and talked about. So we were able to show that GIS is not some sort of back office afterthought,
Mm-hmm.
but actually it's a driver of innovation if we think about it that way.
Yeah. Now, can you also say that distributing the message about your GIS, distributing the message about your successes also helps drive that awareness and also enables you to do a little bit more than the norm?
I think there's truth to that. It's it's a funny one. Of course, everybody wants to feel good about the organization they work for. So if you're getting accolades and you're getting recognition and awards, it's very good for people. And look, I'm modest enough to say I've been bold in this area, and I've promoted the work of Palo Alto quite assertively. But there's a balance, maybe sometimes too much. You got to figure out what the right message is for your community. But yeah, I mean, if you build something like OpenGIS, and I thank one of your participants there for sharing the link.
Mm-hmm.
If you build something like that and you tell the world about it, and people use it and they compliment it, it's a great boost. And the more innovation we did in Palo Alto, the more the council noticed, and I would go to an event and the mayor would be talking, and he or she would say, and we've done 10 apps that do this, like the little bit to brag a little bit about the city. It was good.
Yeah.
But I think I'm also not shy to say best practices, meter it correctly. I think there were times when I personally did too much. I probably should have wound it back a little bit, but find the right balance for your agency.
Yeah. Hey, Tim, I'm sorry to bogart like all the questions here.
No, you're fine. I like the way the stream of the conversation is going. I do have a couple of comments about, well, I'll just tell you a quick story. I found myself at an IT conference, and it was IT that was struggling, similar to this conversation where, how do you get a seat at the table, right? When the city or the organizations, it always lands on IT as an after event. And so this particular speaker, this keynote was talking about how you need to kind of belly up, right? Get up to the table and show off your wares. And every example she used was a GIS example. And I thought to myself, well, this is right. GIS can be if you find yourself in IT and you're a GIS person, be the face of IT, because IT is always largely behind the scenes. It's infrastructure and operations and things like that. But to have it out there, to show off like Jonathan's talking about, look what we've done. GIS is a perfect way to show off what that is. So, but let me get to a question here for Jonathan. So, in my experience, and I don't know if this is everyone's, is the GIS people are just a different breed than the IT people usually are. So, how do you bridge, or what do you do about that culture difference? How do you blend that, if you will?
Maybe one day you and I will grab a coffee or something. You'll give me some more insight on that. There must be some real deep story behind that. No, I appreciate the question. Look, we all think we're different. We all, each profession has its own nuances. There's no doubt about that. Lawyers are different from architects. They're different from surgeons. Different from city managers. We're all a little bit different based on our background and our education. The fact is, we have to all get along. We don't have the luxury of achieving results alone. We really need to find ways to partner and collaborate to find success. Maybe in the limited time we have left, the real nugget I would just throw out there is, when we get together, we have to remind ourselves who we're serving. you know, whether you're in private industry or public sector, and you run a department, you know, you're not going into work to do it for yourself. You got customers, you know, you got shareholders, you have community members, you have visitors, you know, and that becomes your common denominator. Why do we do what we do, and who do we serve? Well, we do what we do to serve those people. And I think we need to recognize that GIS teams are different. We can recognize that, you know, certain IT parts of IT, the data center group or the engineering team are different. But we have to work together, and we should remind ourselves every time we meet, why are we doing this, and who's it for? And I think suddenly the differences are, you know, they're there, but they're not as important.
Yep, that's a great reply there. I really appreciate this, Jonathan. This has been a fabulous discussion, and you know, as I hope people can really see why I follow this guy. You know, I mean, he's just a plethora of information. Even though he's not specifically in GIS, but you can take all of those key points and apply it to GIS. And so, you know, he's definitely made a success out of it. And really appreciate your time that you invested into this webinar, Jonathan. And what is the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Well, thank you for asking me that great question. You know, we live in the 21st century. There's no such thing as, you know, a webinar that starts and stops and it's over. It's a continuous conversation. So I really would encourage people to follow me on Twitter and message me on Twitter. It's at Reichental, you know, at REICHENTAL. Very easy. I'm very responsive to that. LinkedIn is also good. If you're not a Twitter person, a lot of people aren't Twitter people. LinkedIn is very strong, and I will definitely be responsive. I think those are the two best ways.
Awesome. And while you're on there, on his LinkedIn page, go check out his lynda.com courses. They're top notch. And you'll get a lot of great information out of him through those links. So again, Jonathan, thank you. I will have this posted hopefully by Monday, and we'll have all the show notes included as well. And then we'll also take this chat and we'll run it through Tim's little script, and we'll post it on our Slack group too. So thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for your time. Good luck in your endeavors, and appreciate you having on.
All right.
The pleasure was all mine. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.